This next one is about email. And email is this thing that's still around. It still exists, and we use it every day, and it's the oldest, one of the oldest things and oldest technologies on the internet. So we're going to have, up in a moment, talk all about email. Please have a round of applause for Julie Ng.
Are you guys excited? Woohoo! That's really good because I slept for 4 hours last night, and I think I changed my slides so often. I'm really excited too because I have no idea how this talk is going to turn out. That's supposed to be orange, but it's pink. That's all right, whatever. So my talk is called Mastering Email and the Internet's Cockroach, which I'll explain in a bit. So a little bit about me. My name is Julie. I'm an American, and I've been living in Munich, Germany for about 8 years now. Pretty much my entire adult life after school, so apologies if every now and then a German word comes out or if something sounds weird. It's because I'm really tired and my brain's all screwed up when it comes to languages. I actually study international relations and economics, which has nothing to do with IT, but I studied abroad in Germany. I thought it was really awesome. Went back, taught English for a while, but I was really poor in a really wealthy city like Munich, so where can you make money? IT. I started actually as a designer, and I have most experience designing and doing front-end work, but now I do mostly development, some front-end, and also some back-end stuff, which I'll talk about as well. Some of you also might have noticed I co-founded and chair of Refresh Munich, a nonprofit in Munich. It has nothing to do with this Refresh conference, but it just shows great minds think alike. And I'm also a runner and a climber. So a lot of you have asked, oh, what have you seen of Estonia so far? Do you like it? And I was like, well, I've seen the airport, the hotel, and this venue. But during lunch, I saw there's a giant cruise ship. There's got to be water somewhere. And I'm originally from Boston, so I was like, I got to go see the ocean. So I walk all the way over there, and I'm like, oh, look, it's pretty. I'm going to take a picture. Take my phone out of my pocket. And I'm like, wait a minute, where's my conference badge? So I'm doing this all at the port, and everybody, well, there's like maybe 10 people. They're like, what's going on with that girl? She's crazy. So I came back, and I said, I'm really sorry. This is really embarrassing. I lost my badge. But somebody found it and turned it in. Who was it? Was it one of you guys? It has to be one of you guys. All right, so you don't want to, get the thank you, but I want to say whoever it was, thank you very much for finding my badge, so it's not as embarrassing as it otherwise would be. So 2 nights ago, 2 nights ago, so I was checking in for this flight. I was actually a little bit tired, but I'm like, all right, I'm going to check in. Okay, my name is spelled correctly. Wait, I need a boarding pass. How am I going to do this? So I was like, all right, I want to get it by email. I don't want to get anything by SMS. When I want to get an email with my boarding pass. So I fill it out, and then it looked like this again. And I was like, what? Okay, where's my boarding pass? Or it didn't say anything, I didn't get an email, so I filled it out again. I got this screen again. So then I think I clicked a couple more times, and then I got this error message, and I was like, oh, you're checked in. But where's my boarding pass? I don't have your app, I need to print it out. So I did something else, and then I got this. So, when I saw this, I was like, the one thing you guys as developers should never ever do is say 404. That means nothing to most people. It means nothing to your user. I'm a nerd, I know what it means, but still, you should never ever say stuff like that, right? So I have a design and user experience background. What I tell people is, imagine next time you're gonna go home, you're gonna visit your mom, and she's like, oh, what do you want for dinner? And you say to her, I want the special menu number 2. She's like, what is that? It's like, well, that's what I get for lunch every day. She doesn't know what that is. So you should never tell a user 404, 403, 500, Heroku H12, whatever. You shouldn't really tell. You should tell them actually what's the problem. And in this case, actually, the problem was just the email arrived about 1 minute later. Okay? The point of this story is time is really, really important when it comes to email. I don't want a push notification. I don't have your app. So if I do something, I need to get the email. I need to get it now. And you might think, oh, why are you picking on Estonian Air? It's just like a small airline, and it's just 1 minute. Yeah, it's just 1 minute, but you saw that I generated all these errors, right? So you might have a guy later like Ben coming along, look at the server logs. Where are all these errors? I was like, well, actually, I caused them, but I was confused because it took a while to send me an email. Earlier, Cristiano made fun of the French, and I bought a ticket once to the US, and the email with the receipt came 12 hours later. It was like, okay, maybe just a couple minutes. I think after an hour, I called Air France. I was like, did I get my flight? It's like 600 euros. I'm not going to buy another one, because then you're going to be like, you can't return it. You bought it twice. They were like, no, you're in there. I'm like, well, where's my confirmation? And they were like, it'll eventually get there. And it took 12 hours for them to send me an email. Don't do that. Okay. Granted, I wanted to say that part of this was my fault, right? So I think Philippe, these guys are here somewhere. At some point, they said they're really excited. And I said, the pressure is on. And this is what they tweeted, which is a GIF, but I'm too stupid to do like an animated GIF in a presentation. But she's like doing this with her head and just like, yeah, that's how I was last night. And that's how I'm a little bit like right now, because I needed the double espresso to be awake. Okay, so let's go back to email. Email is the beautiful cockroach of a social network, wrote Alexis Madrigal, I'm really sorry, I butchered your name, from the Atlantic magazine in August 2014. Cockroaches will survive if a meteor comes and hits the earth, like just like the dinosaurs died, we will die, but the cockroach will survive. Somebody somehow accidentally drops an atomic bomb somewhere, we will all die, but the cockroach will survive. So similarly, even though we have Skype, we have Slack, we have Secret and whatever, it won't kill email. Those things are really cool, but it won't kill email. One of the reasons is that email is actually open, if you think about it, right? So I give all my email to Gmail, and I know the NSA is reading everything, but you guys as nerds could say, this is really important to me, I'm going to set up my own server at home, and I'm going to handle everything myself. And you can, with your own email server, participate and send emails to everybody in the world. You don't need to sign up with a particular service to be able to do something. So in that sense, I think it's going to stick around for a really, really long time. And I'm probably not the only one who actually likes receiving emails. I don't like my phone vibrating with notifications all the time, because most of the time, it's not really important. I can do email whenever I want. So I'm going to also start with a little bit of story about the user experience of email. And sort of, when you're doing email right, it's just not about development. Development is a great part of it, but it's also about all the different steps. Because often, it's not just about one particular email, it's going to be about a series of emails. So this is a story that I tell. My sister was and still is teaching English in Japan, and I really wanted to visit her. But tickets usually cost about 1,000 euros or 1,200 euros. And I was like, yeah, it's kind of really expensive. So then one day I get this newsletter. It was like, okay, Tokyo for 749 euros. I'm there. So I ultimately did book a trip to Tokyo. And so that was the first step. Oh, this is so small. I can't read this. Anyway, so I got the newsletter. And eventually I booked the flight. And then I got the email confirmation. What's really cool about email confirmation with Lufthansa is you get the calendar events attached to the email. And it's not just that Gmail is so smart. If you open up in your iPhone or a mail application, they recognize it as well, and then you just, bam, pop it in your calendar. Which is great, because otherwise, like this week, I was like, wait, I'm flying to Tallinn. When was that again? What time is that? You know, I got to make sure I actually catch the flight. I have missed flights before. I'm that type of person. Really, really bad. So again, Gmail is pretty smart. It'll show you a preview over there, and then it'll be actually a little bit bigger as well. Let's see, next one. What they also do before the trip is due, right? So I bought these tickets in August, and I actually flew in March. And the week before, a couple days before, they said, oh, this is what the weather is like in Tokyo. So this is what you can expect, and you want to pack your stuff. I also get a reminder to check in as well. So it's like, okay, I want to get the best seat that I can. And then I also get a boarding pass confirmation. I do use the app, but it's just in case, as a backup, I have an email. You never know if you, on the way to the airport or at the airport, you drop your iPhone in the toilet, and then it no longer works, and you really want it in some other format that you can have. So paper is actually good. So that answers my question about email. It's not just about front end, right? So we looked at the calendar files that are attached to the emails. You need to know how to do that. You need to know how to attach something to the email. You need to be able to, as backend developers, provide that data, okay, to the users. As a designer, you want to create some really cool, awesome things. You're like, I want to do this, I want to do this. Before you even design, you need to go to the developer and say, hey, can you get this stuff for me and send it to me as some way, as a file, so that the Gmail client or whatever, they automatically know what it is? Because you can design great stuff, but the backend might say, we can't provide that information for you. For whatever reason. Maybe it's not cache, you can't get it fast enough, whatever. But it's your job to work together, kind of like some of the presentations we're talking about, Liana's talking about Prezi, to see what's possible and what you can do in the best way possible. Here's a couple more examples of emails that I'd like, or just sort of processes that really sort of show that it's not about one email or one transaction. It's often about many different ones. So I do a lot of online shopping, and I like to know often when is whatever I ordered actually left the warehouse. When has it been delivered? Maybe it got delivered to a neighbor. They're not emails that I read sort of actively, but I see it in my inbox, okay, and I pay attention to it. You might think, no, it's not that important. Actually, it is. The German Post went on strike, I think, about 2 months ago, so everybody was checking their emails. Anything leaving the warehouse? Anything leaving the warehouse? And then it would leave the warehouse and wouldn't arrive for maybe 2 weeks. And this is important because it's the middle of summer, and actually I went away on vacation. So it was like, is it going to get here before my vacation or not? So they're little things, and maybe they're not important most of the time, but when you need them for whatever reason, they're really, really important. Again, if your iPhone breaks on the way to the airport, you lose it, you forget it, you drop it in the toilet, or the post goes on strike. You have other forms of backup, so to speak. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is how do you sort of approach an email, especially in terms of design and development. But before I continue, I want to ask, am I talking too quickly? No, okay, good, because I do that sometimes. I talk too fast. If I do, just give a wave and be like, you're going too fast. So, one thing you have to often remind people that it's not a web page. And this is not just, my examples come from my actual inbox from this past week, so there's a lot of German sites. Germans are not the only ones who actually do this. Some people, designers, they design it as if it's a web page, and you can't see anything. There's no alt tags. So it's like, what are you trying to tell me? What are you trying to sell me? And this is a site that I shop at regularly, so it's like, I want to read your content, but I can't. And litmus.com, which does email testing, they also do email analytics, and according to them, 51% of opens are now on mobile phones, right? So you think, oh, maybe they're not reading on their phones anyway. You never know. If it's 50%, that's a lot of people not seeing anything. The other thing you have to be careful about is if you're designing it like a web page, you often have more complicated layouts, you have much more code, or you're also just stuffing way too much content in there, and your email is going to get cut off. Gmail cuts it off, not just on the web, but also on your phones. And I haven't personally seen this in a while, and I couldn't find if it's still true, but iOS used to cut off emails as well after about 10 kilobytes, because you don't want to be downloading lots of data and annoying people who don't know that your email is that long. You can do email right. I'm a runner. I'm actually a barefoot runner, so I subscribe to Vivo Barefoot's newsletters because I buy their normal shoes as well. And what's really great about this email is it's very much to the point. It works even when images are not loaded, and it's really clear what's a button, right? So the buttons are like, hit me, hit me, hit me. You can see it. You know where the buttons are. As nerds, we're used to tapping on anything, like images, and it'll open in a link. But if you talk to some of your customers, depending upon who they are, you'll often discover they don't know that. They're looking for a link that says more or whatever. What I really liked about this email was that it was really clear, this is a button, you can click it. And they did it in a way that doesn't look like a normal button per se, although I guess it does look like flat design. So this is what I was talking about in terms of cutoffs. Right? On the web, it's 102 kilobytes, which is actually a lot of code if you think about it. But every now and then, I still also see that 3- message clipped, and then view entire message link. So the next time you're in your inbox and looking at email, see if you come across that. You might be surprised that actually you might see it every now and then. And yeah, so these are the numbers, 20 kilobytes on the Gmail app in iOS. It's also the same thing for the Gmail app on Android. It'll be 20 kilobytes as well. And again, the 15 kilobytes number is out there, but I personally haven't seen it for a while. Maybe it's because LTE is really popular now. I don't know. But I threw it in there. Anyway, the other thing you have to be careful about is you guys work together. You're creating all these emails. You have notification emails. You have newsletters, whatever. Do they all look the same? If they do, you have a problem. Emails often look the same, not because the designer designed them that way. It might be the developer says, oh, we only have this inflexible system. It has to work that way. Well, in which case, you got to fix that. You guys got to work together and fix that. This is from a startup in Munich, which is actually really successful. They're bootstrapped, but they make 7 figures a month. And they do a lot of emails. The things work. But I was like, hey, guys, I have no idea what you're trying to tell me. every email has pretty much the exact same header, and maybe it'll say, if you see one of them says week 2, week 1, but other than that, you're like, what are you trying to tell me? So that's also really bad. And a lot of companies are also guilty of the same thing. You have a lot of transactional emails that might be very simple and very similar, but you have to visually also distinguish them because some emails are more important than others, and if they all look the same, then I can't tell that, or I can't see that. So just to summarize, right? So email is not a web page. You want to keep it brief, and you want to make things obvious, and you want to keep things different. So what's so hard about emails then? You'll see a lot of different developers complaining about emails for 2 reasons, Outlook and Gmail, right? What I like about this first comment from a web page, and notice it's 3 years ago, the user, who's a developer, is basically saying, you know, it's the user's fault. Get a better email client. He was going to put that in a comment so that only Outlook users would see that. That's not what you want to do. It's not the user's fault. Maybe it's Outlook's fault, but it's not the user's fault, and it's your job to fix that. Gmail is also a pain, and that's a little bit sort of a hot topic right now, how you approach that. A lot of developers are pissed off about it. My opinion is just sort of, if you got to do it, you got to do it. And I think also in Europe, there are many more Android users than in the US. But most of the articles and people who are writing about it and blogging about it, they're from the US or the UK. So I think I saw here several, actually, Android phones. So you want to be careful of that. No matter what you do, you have to test, 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 test. So a lot of email development is just hitting send and waiting. Fortunately, Litmus is really, really good. Usually results come in now within a minute or 2, which is actually really impressive considering that they're sending your email to 30 virtual machines, running software and generating you screenshots all within a minute or 2. Most of them load within 30 seconds, but mostly within a minute or 2. The exception is, unfortunately, Gmail or Android. They don't have that many Android VMs. I don't know why. So I own actually very many phones. This is just a small selection of them, of the latest Android systems, but I have, you know, ones with 2, 3 on them, the really tiny screens and whatnot. It depends on what the client wants. If they really want to support old phones, then, well, you got to do it. You got to pay me for it, but I will do it. So Outlook. The thing about Outlook is that if you look at everything here in the right column, it doesn't support any of these things. The most important being display and the float property, right? So that's the reason why we have to use tables to build emails. I mean, honestly, we had to do that in the 90s. Like, I'm thinking, get over it. Like, Microsoft is not going to change their line. They're always going to use the Microsoft Word engine to render their emails. You can complain about all you want, but they're not going to change it. Email's been around for a long time, as have developers, so we've actually had many different solutions now for very common problems. So things like buttons, you can do that. I'm going to go through this kind of quickly, but I will post my slides online, and you'll see that I try to do sources for everything with links, so you can click on them and learn more about them later. So this is what a button code used to look like. You had to use VML code, which is basically you're dragging out a shape like you would in Microsoft Word to create a button. There are hacks now so that you don't have to do that. And so I've taken these hacks and actually build sort of my own code, improve my own workflow to make things easier. So what I tend to do is actually I write code like this, which then uses a template that looks like this to make my button. The styles I inline later, so then what you get is something that looks like that. But when I'm actually working, when I'm actually coding, I'm working with the first thing. All right? You do not want to be working with you do not want to work with that. This is pretty good, but if you have a really long email, it gets to be a lot. This is probably the best. Okay. Frameworks. I just wanted to address that sort of question because somebody is bound to bring it up. There are many different frameworks out there for you to create emails. I don't use them. And I'm not picking on ink per se, but it's full of code that you don't need. And if you remember, I talked about emails getting cut off. I don't like code that I don't need. If I don't need it, why is it there? And it's the same thing like people use Bootstrap and they include the entire thing. They don't even know what it does. It also makes debugging really hard, so I write everything from scratch. I'm well known in the email community for the Antwort template, which I created in collaboration with a client. who wanted to do responsive emails. The Antwort, the original version, I think I wrote in 2013 or 2012, and this is how it used to work. You basically had a table, there we go, and then you have your column inside, whatever content. Right now I just have text there, but you could put images, you could put more, copy, whatever. And all you had to do back then was say, okay, we're going to force it to do display block. Starting with Android 4.4, that no longer worked because the Gmail app would strip out your doc type, and it wouldn't let you do the transformation into a row. So what you had was then Gmail just squished your email, and it looked really, really ugly. So this is the new way to do it now. The template updated at some point, I think this year or last year. Time flies. I have no idea anymore. You can check the GitHub repository and find out. The principle is the same. We have a wrapper table, which is included in comments, just for Microsoft Office. And then you have two tables. So you have here, if this is a two-column layout, one is aligned left, one is aligned right. And then under a certain width, you can then force them to 100%. And then voila, it's responsive and it still has tables. If you look online about how to target Microsoft Outlook, I love how a lot of people say, here's this table, and what you can do is say, if greater than MSO 9. Just so you guys know, 9 through 10 and 11, they'll never render, because they use Internet Explorer, whatever is on that Windows system, usually the XP system, so it'll be 6 or 7. It will never render. That's why I just use MSO. 2000, what is it, 7, 10, and 13. Usually the problems, if you have a problem in Outlook, it will appear in all 3 versions and groups. Very seldom do you have one random version of Outlook giving you a hard time. There are a lot of different hacks out there that you can use if you're running into certain problems. This one basically talks about how instead of using a TD, you can use a TH tag for the columns. The TH tag, for whatever reason, is not dependent on the doc type, so you can use this to basically fudge columns or fake columns. But it doesn't feel right to me because, as again, your columns are generally not just text. You might have other things in there, which is why I would have tables in there. And for me, throwing a table in a table head tag, it just sounds wrong. Like, no, I can't do that. So here's an example that I wanted to show in terms of what email code looks like. It's not as complicated as you think. You just have to sort of think in a certain way. You know, I use tables more or less like inline blocks. If you don't have a width, it'll kind of be as big as it needs to be. The problem with that in Microsoft Outlook is that they don't line up properly. Microsoft doesn't quite understand that. Every other client does, so the only thing you need to do actually is add maybe just one more bit of code, and then Outlook will line everything up properly. As you can see, I have each meta property in its own table, which is in its own table anyway, right? You need often a wrapper table to clear items, right? The clear fix hacks, when it was first introduced, if you look at the code, it's just display a table. That's all we're basically doing. And the only other thing we need to do is just add different cells for Office, and that's it, and everything just works. It's not as complicated as you think in terms of getting things to work for Outlook. For Gmail, that's a whole nother story. It's a bit more complicated. You'll see things like this if you want to have mobile content that isn't shown initially on your desktop version. Right? It might be that if you have a really complicated layout, you have to put your button in another place. So you have to hide the button first, and then you show it when it's on a mobile phone. And as you can see from these comments, that Gmail is the pain in the butt, not Outlook. So I'm actually, in the interest of time, might skip through a lot of this really quickly because I want to show you some cooler stuff later. Again, I'll post them online so you can look at that. What I do want to do is explain how Gmail now they try to figure out their own way to do responsive. Fudge in American English means that like you kind of fake it, right? But if you ever had chocolate fudge in your hand, it melts, so it's not very stable. It just does whatever it wants, and you can't predict what it's going to do. If you have a relatively simple layout, you can try to guess, but you always have to test. When I showed earlier the Antwort, for 2 columns, 3 columns is very sort of similar, and you have tables. And what Gmail will try to do is, oh, I see 3 tables. right? They doesn't see the wrapper table, which is only shown to Outlook. I have a small phone, so I'm just going to take all the tables and make them really, really wide. And if you design your email such a way, then it looks okay. Like this doesn't look broken. It doesn't look nice, but it doesn't look broken. You can't see the lines here. There's a border here because we have media queries to format this a little bit nicely. Depending on what kind of image you have, you can shrink it, you can float it to the right and whatnot. But this looks nicer, but this is not broken. And that's what I always try to aim for, is just not broken. Can't be perfect, but it should not be broken. This is an example of if you Google sort of Gmail is doing something and I don't want it to do it, this is one thing that I found. If you want it to keep the width of 600, your email is really, really complicated. And if Gmail tries to do something, your email explodes, then it is better to have a large version, which you then just have your users zoom in. To do that, you have to use an image. I don't know why it doesn't work otherwise, so I have an image, and then I do display none. I often forget how to fix things in Gmail, so I go into Git and I do a search, and then I find things. So I found that. If you have an image that looks weird on the Android phone, if there's a gap, or if there's a blue border sometimes, you just have to add display block, and suddenly everything works. You have to be careful if you're using this where you have multiple images lining up next to each other that are more inline, then you really have to do testing to show that, to check that you didn't mess it up somewhere else. One of the things that really drove me nuts when I looked at emails I did 2 years ago and how Gmail renders them now is they stretch them, right? So what I've done starting this year is that I never really define heights for images. You have to define the width, otherwise Outlook just shows this giant image, right? We have bigger images than we actually need because we have Retina displays. You want them to look good, so you give a width. But don't give a height because you can't override the height because Gmail doesn't do media queries or external style sheets for that matter. So just do height auto, and that's inlined in all your images. Debugging. There's another hack out there that works, a lot of people like to use. It's the margin hack. And so the lowercase one doesn't work. You just use the uppercase one. However, you might use an inliner, and the inliner strips it down to something that's more standard, lowercase, and then suddenly all your emails break. So the next, and probably the last thing I'm going to show, because, yeah, I was excited about my talk, and it turns out I put way too much stuff in it, or I actually rambled too much in the beginning. So the reason why we inline CSS is for Gmail. Gmail is the only client that doesn't actually support styles that you put in your header. And of course, you don't want to work with code that looks like this. You'd rather have code that looks like this, which is why we inline our CSS. There are some JavaScript ones. These are two of them. Juice is actually made by Automatic, the company behind WordPress. And there's two Ruby ones that are pretty familiar. Premailer is the most popular one, but actually I use Rody. I find it to be more stable. I prefer Ruby over JavaScript as well because I find it to be more stable or more refined. It's more ripe. It's older. So yeah, there we go. There's a chart here, which I'm going to skip over. I'm so sorry. So sorry. I'm going to talk even faster now. If you're using a CSS inliner, here are some of the common things that will happen that will screw your email over. And the thing is, you'll say, I did it right. I did it right. Why is it broken? It's like, well, your workflow broke it. Comments. You have a lot of different comments. We talked about the if MSOs, and they might get removed by your inliner. The other thing, too, is that they always think, I inlined your CSS, so I don't need whatever else you put in there. It's like, yes, I do need some of the other things. iOS and other apps often auto-link things like addresses, or if your company happens to be called, mycompany.com, you have this ugly bright blue link, and this is how you stop it, but you can't inline that. You need to keep that in your head. So if that gets taken out, then you have ugly emails. So this is an example of the inliner not working properly, which is why I don't use Premailer. Here's an example of a inliner trying to be smart. They take various CSS definitions and they make it into one. It's a bit more efficient, but it breaks actually an email because if you know, if a browser does not understand a property, right, they just ignore it. If there was a property before that they understood, then that's what they display. However, if you have that all in one line, it doesn't understand anything, and it just chucks it out the window. OK, so this is a checklist. The other thing you should check out is actually your workflow. I also work as a consultant sometimes, not just a contractor. And I had a client that said, basically, our emails are also really big. That's one of the problems that we have. And they, for whatever reason, they also store all their emails that they send to clients. And so they had that problem in addition to the emails getting cut off on their client side. Can you look at the emails? I also did a redesign, whatever, for them. And then I opened their emails, and I was like, oh, this is why your emails are so big. Right? This email was initially 108 kilobytes. Then I just ran it through an HTML cleaner type thing, and it was down to 36. So 66% just white space. And it's because they also use modules to put everything together, but if you're not paying attention to the exact end result, you might get something that looks like that, and you're like, oh, that's actually not very good. Lewis, are you going to kick me off the stage?
Maybe some questions.
Maybe some questions soon, okay. Yeah, my last thing was going to be demos, but demos or questions? You decide.
Questions. Let's go for questions,
okay,
shall we? Okay. Sorry to make that one up for you. Very, very interesting talk. I think there's so much to it. I think we're all very interested in this. I mean, I don't think it is, but the number one question, is email going to die? Is it dying? Is it dead? Is it good?
It's definitely not dead. It's very healthy. Actually, it's the best marketing channel out there in terms of return on investment. There are various studies from groups like McKinsey and Forrester will show you that if you're a big company and you're investing in marketing, email marketing works often like an order of magnitude better than social media. So all the money you're throwing in Facebook ads and Twitter and whatnot, not bringing you much. Email, sending newsletters and whatnot will generate more sales for you than that. And that's fact.
I think there is something to that because an email will always be an email. Facebook, who knows how they're going to change the algorithm, how much you're going to pay. What's your thing? What about text emails? All this seems like so much work.
This seems like a lot of work.
This seems like a lot of work. Why not just write a text email? Why not?
The great thing about a text email is it's not broken. So Estonia Air, when they sent me my boarding pass, it was just a text email and I had an attachment. It's fine. It's not broken. It really is up to you. A lot of people say that it's important for their branding, right? That's why they send, really nice emails. If you have the budget for it, go for it. But if you don't, that's fine. I would say use text emails because it's not broken. The other thing I should point out is that the Apple Watch actually loads the text email, the first couple lines. So some companies will actually just send HTML emails. They don't even send a text version. If you're doing that, you might have a bunch of smartphone people going, I got an email, but there's nothing in it. So.
Okay. Now, was most of your knowledge, was this gained, just experience over the years? Is that how you've come to have this, just from, hitting your head against the wall a million times, trying to load, reload? Oh my God, is this all, is that how you've basically come to this knowledge, or is there some other place?
And I think in terms of email development, that's how anybody's learned it. It's all trial and error. I missed the age when it was just Outlook that was a problem because Microsoft doesn't update Microsoft Word that often, so the problems were all predictable. Gmail, unfortunately, is really fast, and so sometimes things work, and 6 months later, it doesn't work anymore. Not that often. I tend to code very conservatively, which is why I don't use hacks. But still, it happens, and it's just all trial and error. That's the way the field is, unfortunately. But it works.
Okay. Is there any, you've talked to her about coding your own mails. What about integrating with a third party or something to do that instead, or it's basically for you, it's just in the...
That is sort of what I do. One cool thing that I want to show really quickly, except all the glasses are going to get in the way. Turn on mirroring really quickly. Can you see that?
We think.
Yes,
yeah.
You can see that. Oh, it's actually really small. So let's make this
just go for
bigger.
it. We can see it. We'll talk it through. Ooh.
You'll talk it through?
Yeah.
You'll talk it through. Okay. So one of the things that I actually do is I have my own workflow, and I'll do something like this. If it'll run.
Looks great.
Which it should.
So oh, yeah.
And I've actually already built some of the things, so you can see it. Yeah. So you'll see that this is what the partial looks like, and then what I have in the end is the share.
Oh, right. Okay, so that's the actual code that's going to generate the mail, right? It's going to do the loop. Right, and that's what's actually come out.
That's what actually comes out. That's probably not a great example, but this is what will actually come out. There's a couple of weird things here that's caused by Nokogiri, but this is what I give to clients, right? So this is the probably biggest email project that I've had in terms of the number of emails. I've deleted from the repo, actually, most of the emails for the purpose of this demo, and this is what they put into their system. If you use something like MailChimp, they also have another service called Mandrill, which I use as well to test emails, and you can store some of your code there so that you can use the APIs just to send out, okay, I'm sending an email to Julie, this is her name, and this is the link that I want you to throw into this template. So you can outsource some of that. But yeah, I do my own system, but it has to then fit into whatever system the client's using, and usually this works really, really well.
Very good. I think we're going to have to leave it there. Please, one more round of applause for Julie. Yeah. Very interesting stuff, email. Still very relevant.